You probably threw half of this away without a second thought. A toilet wearing a sweater, a fireplace glowing in the middle of the room like it had fallen from the sky, a doll standing guard over a spare roll of toilet paper. Nobody ever asked why. Every house on the street called all of it normal, starting with the one that dressed up its own toilet. The carpet came first. That part almost made sense. But then somebody in that house looked at the cold porcelain of the toilet itself and decided it looked underdressed. And the strangest part is, you knew exactly which house it was. The one where the lid wore a thick shag cover, the tank wore a matching one, and both matched the rug, the towels, and sometimes a little cover on the tissue box. A whole coordinated outfit for the most private room in the house. You remember the fight too. Lift the lid and all that dense fur pushed straight back against your spine. So you held it open with one hand, or you didn't win. Sit down, and somewhere under the fabric a thin foam core let out its slow, quiet hiss. The sound every guest pretended not to hear. Everyone called it warm, called it soft. Not one person said out loud what happened to that fabric when it got wet. It got washed on Sunday and stretched back over the tank, and the question went another week without being asked. Think the bathroom was as strange as this house got? Something made of brass was waiting in the living room, right next to the good armchair. Walk out of that bathroom and into the living room, and you'd pass an ashtray stand, a piece of furniture that has completely vanished from American homes. Heavy and waist-high, polished brass or amber glass, built for one purpose only. It stood beside the good armchair at exact elbow height, so no guest ever had to reach. The nicer ones had a chrome button on top. Press it, and a little trapdoor spun open with a soft mechanical clack, and the ash in the dish dropped away into a chamber nobody ever wanted to open. It was hospitality, a sign you were welcome to stay a while. And by 9 o'clock on a Friday night, that smell had settled so deep into the paneling and the couch cushions that the family living there couldn't smell it at all. Ask anyone who grew up in that house what home smelled like, and they still can't tell you. It just smelled like home. A few feet from that same chair, something alive was growing inside the coffee table. Somewhere in the middle of that decade, a wooden coffee table turned into a terrarium. What the living room needed, apparently, was a table you could look into. A thick sheet of glass on top, and underneath it, a hollow basin filled with soil, charcoal, pebbles, and live ferns. A small, humid jungle. You set your mug down on the glass and looked straight through it into another climate. That was the whole point. Then the underside of the glass fogged over and someone had to reach in and wipe it just to see the plants everyone was supposed to be enjoying. The ferns thinned out, the fog dried into chalky rings, and sooner or later the basin held plastic fruit and old TV guides instead. But if you leaned in close, you could still catch it, wet soil, in the middle of the living room. The plant table wasn't the strangest object in that room. Fire was, right there in the middle of the carpet. There was no brick, no chimney breast against the wall. The fireplace stood out in the open, in the middle of the carpet, balanced on 3 thin metal legs, like something that had landed there. A tall, glossy cone, fire engine red or burnt orange, with a slim black pipe running straight up and disappearing through a hole cut in the ceiling. If you grew up near one, you know the heat it threw. Dry, fierce, and close, with that faint smell of hot iron that reached you before the warmth did. There was no glass door between you and the fire, just a wire mesh screen that popped off by hand, and a warning you heard so many times you can still hear the exact voice that said it. Do not touch the sides. It was supposed to make the den feel like a ski lodge in a magazine, and on the right winter night, it did. You sat at what you'd been told was a safe distance, and you watched it glow. Nobody ever moved the couch back another inch. Walk across the hall to the dining room, and an entire wall would stare back at you. Gold-veined mirror, tile after tile. Somebody you knew had that wall. Maybe it was your own dining room. One entire wall, covered edge to edge in square mirror tiles. Every tile shot through with thin veins of gold. The magazine said it would double the size of the room. Peel, stick, done. What it actually did was multiply everything. Sit down to dinner and your own family came back at you in a grid of slightly offset pieces, warmed gold by the lamp, your father at the head of the table 4 times over, from 4 slightly different angles, all chewing at once. It looked expensive at the time, like a hotel lounge with a coat check, and nobody sitting at that table would have said otherwise. It took years, and one tile at a time, letting go of the wall as the adhesive gave out, before anyone standing in that room began to wonder what exactly they'd been looking at every night at dinner. That wall at least made sense as decoration. Grandma's toilet tank had a doll standing on it, and no one could tell you why. On the back of the tank, usually in a grandmother's bathroom, stood a small figure in a wide crocheted skirt, bright acrylic yarn stitched by hand, a doll from the waist up, and a bell of ruffles below. And underneath that skirt, hidden like something that needed hiding, a spare roll of toilet paper. They were made by the dozen, given away at every holiday, sold by the table at craft fairs. The logic was modesty. A backup roll shouldn't just sit there, exposed, where guests could see it. It needed a dress. So it stood watch for years, that little yarn sentry, in nearly every grandmother's bathroom in America. And if you were a kid who asked the obvious question, why is there a doll guarding the toilet paper, you got a look instead of an answer. You lifted the skirt when you needed the roll and put her back exactly the way you found her. Grandma wasn't the only one keeping a handmade guard in the house. In the den, a piece of string art shaped like an owl watched from the wall, built from nothing but nails and thread. Above the stereo or over the couch in the den hung a piece of mathematics pretending to be art. A board covered in black velvet, dozens of small brass nails, hammered in by hand one at a time. Stretched between those nails, yards of neon or metallic thread pulled into the shape of a ship, an owl, or a pattern with no name that seemed to spiral inward the longer you looked at it. Some came from kits, but the ones you remember were made in the garage over a long weekend by a father bent over a paper template with a tack hammer. The thread was strung so tight it hummed if you dared to pluck it. So you plucked it once when nobody was in the room. It hung there for years after that. The dust settled into the thread, and no one ever tried to clean it or took it down. It had taken a whole weekend. It stayed. Look up. The ceiling was hiding something too, and it sparkled. You saw it best from bed, in the last light before someone turned off the lamp. The whole ceiling, rough and bumpy like popcorn, and scattered all through it. Tiny flecks of glitter that caught the light and shimmered. A cheap, sparkling galaxy hanging over every room in the house. The builders knew exactly what it was. A shortcut that hid bad plaster and swallowed sound, and the glitter was the finishing move that turned it into a feature. Nobody ever pointed at that ceiling and asked for their smooth plaster back. What you remember is more specific than that. The broom handle that brushed it by accident and brought a shower of white crumbs down onto the carpet. Night after night, in that last minute before sleep, you memorized a random pattern of bumps above your bed, without meaning to. The ceiling only sparkled. The clock on the kitchen wall did more than that. It watched you, and its eyes actually moved. On the kitchen wall, above the breakfast table, hung a grinning black plastic cat, the Kit-Cat Klock. Its tail swung left and right, keeping time. Its wide white eyes swung with it, left and right, every second of every day, tracking something in the room that was never quite there. It was treated like a resident. It watched you eat your cereal, and it watched the empty kitchen at 3 in the morning, tail still swinging, eyes still going, for years without stopping. And if there was a real cat in that house too, it spent years trying to catch that tail and never once managed it. None of it felt strange at the time. It was cheerful. It was the kitchen. A lot of them are still up there today, still ticking on the same wall, and it's only in old photographs that some of us finally notice what we grew up under. Something was always watching the room, and something was always trying to catch it. The cat kept watching from the wall above the table. Down on the counter, though, sat something every family in America seemed to own. Across the entire country, dinner came out of the exact same Corningware dish. white milk glass with a brown and gold print, the same little French words for onions and herbs that nobody at the table could actually read. It never chipped, never faded, and in a lot of families it outlived the stove and the house. Around that dish, the rest of the kitchen had quietly turned into a meadow. Poppies on the dish towels, daisies pressed onto the cabinet fronts in peel and stick contact paper, a ceramic family of smiling mushrooms on the counter, canisters, salt and pepper, a cookie jar with a mushroom cap for a lid. None of it did anything, and nobody ever explained why every surface needed to be in bloom. But at 6 o'clock on any weeknight, in 1,000 towns at once, the same casserole landed in the same printed bowl on a counter that looked exactly like this one. And every family at every table believed all of it. The dish, the flowers, the mushrooms was entirely their own. That kitchen was only the daytime version of the house. After dinner on a Saturday, the real house was downstairs, under a thatched roof. Down the basement stairs, past the rec room, there was a corner of the house that wasn't in the same country as the rest of it. A built-in bar with a thatched roof, bamboo on the walls, a row of mismatched bar stools, and a shelf of decanters always about half full. That was where the adults went after dinner on a Saturday. You heard it from the top of the stairs, the icy, the laughing, a record playing underneath. A carved Tiki mug sat next to the ice bucket like it had always belonged there. And for a few hours, a basement in the Midwest became somewhere tropical, and every adult in the room agreed to believe it. The bars came out years ago. Thatch first, then the bamboo, then the whole corner drywalled flat like it never happened. But the mugs survived. They always survive. And when one turns up at the back of a cabinet, wrapped in newspaper from a year you barely remember, you don't see a mug. You hear the ice from the top of the stairs. None of this made sense at the time we lived it, and somehow, that's exactly why it stayed with us. It was simply how an entire decade agreed to live, without ever once discussing it out loud. If any of this brought something back, a smell, a sound, a piece of furniture you'd almost forgotten existed, you already know which decade shaped you. Tell me in the comments which one you still have proof of, tucked away somewhere nobody's found yet.